So yeah, 19 years in the making. But it's just about 19 years ago, I went before the Port Orchard City Council, and there was a zoning ordinance that said that churches could not meet, or religious organizations could not hold services or meetings in commercial properties in the city of Port Orchard. That was actually in their zoning ordinances. And we had met up at the Waterman Club for the first couple of months, which was a blessing and some challenges. We ran out of water, and we ran out of heat, and we ran out of a bunch of stuff up there. But we never ran out of faith and hope and confidence in the Lord. But we found and leased a building here in Port Orchard, the 510 building, now called the Bayside Plaza. Was the 510 building back then. And I went before the city council and I said, hey, it seems like you guys are against the law. And here is Bill Clinton actually signed this law that says you cannot prohibit religious organizations from meeting in commercial spaces, period. And it was actually for prisoners. It was people in prison. It had a connotation about being able to worship in the context of however they wanted to worship. And so the city lawyer was pretty astute and pretty much encouraged the city council to change the zoning ordinance. And so we got to meet in the city of Port Orchard in a commercial space, which was pretty amazing. Since then, where did my voice just go? Since then, many churches have opened up and are meeting in commercial spaces in Port Orchard. And I feel like that was definitely a God thing. And it was a miracle because the city council, I had one meeting to convince them because we were going to meet regardless. We had a signed lease and we were moving. But it all worked out. God's timing was perfect. And so the reason I bring all of this up is we have another church meeting in the mall. And I don't know if you know that or not, but now down below us, there's a church called the Ember Church. And I don't know the pastor, and I kind of looked them up a little bit, and they seem like it's a Church of God Pentecostal, I think, organization. But I just wanted to welcome them to the mall. I will take some time to find out and to do that. And I want to pray right now just to ask the Lord to bless them. We are not in competition, and it's just awesome that another church gets to open up in the city of Port Orchard and provide the good news. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that there is another church in the mall, and we are not at all worried, concerned. We are joyful that they're here, and we want to probably try to find some way to encourage them. And I think they've been around for a while. I think they're just starting to meet in the mall. So it's not a brand new church. You guys are plotting and planning. All right. Staff meeting, we'll talk about this. All right. Yeah. So there's churches all over the place, which is awesome. So that was a miracle, and God continues to do miracles. Well, so let me not delay in the next miracle. Let me invite my lovely wife, Pastor Melynda, up, and we're going to co-share this morning for the first time in 19 years. So she has a mic. She's going to scoot over one. Yes, ma'am. Let me scoot over one. And so our word for this year from the Lord is to come home. And we've been getting testimonies from people. It's been encouraging. We've had a lot of personal stories that have been told. And so this morning, we know many of you, actually, we know all of you, but you may or may not know our whole story. And so this morning, we want to give you kind of our story. So is that okay? Makes sense? We'll do that. So I will start, and then Melynda will jump in. Uh, so I was be coerced. Uh, One way or another, we'll let her share her story too. But because her story, it's our story, and we are here as your co-pastors, and it's because of God, what God has done. So I was born in Boston. Many of you know that, on the East Coast. But in 1962, the last of six. I have two older sisters and three older brothers in that order. Uh, and so anybody who comes from a large family knows that the further down you get in the birth order, the less attention potentially you get. My oldest sister, I think as we were looking through pictures, there's like got to be at least, and no exaggeration, uh, thousands of pictures of her growing up and her young, baby years. I found two pictures of me. Uh, yeah, I had two whole pictures. So apparently, cameras went out of fashion after I was born, and or they just got tired of that. And the first one falls down, gets taken to the hospital, and then as the sixth one shows up and falls down, they say rub some dirt in it. That's just the kind of the way it works in the birth order. And so I kind of made my own way in a lot of things. Kind of relied on myself for a lot of things. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. My dad drove a bus in the city of Boston uh, until he retired. My mom was a waitress and then a homemaker. And so, with all that said, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And I just want to share uh, one story about that significantly impacted me and kind of made me who I was, and then ultimately God used that to make me who I am. Uh, and as a Jew, we believed in God. God was not spoken of in our home, but definitely recognized as existing. And as Jews, we did the bar mitzvahs and the wedding, ceremonies where we dance people around on chairs. If you've seen Fiddler on the Roof, uh, all of that fun stuff. We did the death and mourning practices, which are pretty significant within the Jewish culture and the religion. But we were not very spiritual Jews. There was no Tanakh or Bible of any kind in the house. I think I went to synagogue a few times in grade school because you could get out of regular school to go to a religious school. That was something that they allowed you to do. Until I think we ticked the rabbi off enough that he said, "Don't come back." So that was my religious upbringing. We were, there's Reform Jews, there are conservative Jews, there's Orthodox Jews. Well, we grew up convenient, and I think I've shared that with you. We were conveniently Jewish. And so, when on the East Coast, you would get Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays, you would get, as a Jew, you get those excused absences from school. So we took advantage of that, right? So when it was, but yet we loved sausage. And one of my mom's favorite things to make was pork roast. And so there was no kosher eating, and there was no Sabbath observances. And I think we lit Hanukkah candles. I don't remember ever doing a Passover Seder in my house growing up, but we definitely lit Hanukkah candles, which is interesting because Hanukkah is not even in the Old Testament. It's in the New Testament. We've done those teachings. So that's kind of how I grew up as a convenient Jew with not a lot of money. So how did you grow up, honey?
I grew up. I'm a mixed bundle. I was my mom and my birth father's only child. And when she married my stepdad, I became the fourth child. And then when they had Allison, still became the fourth, but I was the fourth of five. And on my birth father's side of the family, even though I was his only child, I was his youngest child. And so I would spend Christmas Eve with his family, and I would spend the weekend before Christmas Eve with his family. And then I wouldn't see him for a year. And I would see him on my birthday. And so when I talk about my dad, I'm really talking about my stepdad and the home I grew up in. I grew up going to church. We started off in the Baptist church over in Bremerton. And then I was raised in the Assemblies of God Church when we came this way. So I love the old hymns. I can't say that I loved all of them. Mother's Day, I firmly remember a certain pastor. There's the hymn "Faith of Our Fathers." Well, if you look hard enough at that hymnal, there's a verse called "Faith of Our Mothers," and that used to make me groan. It's like, no. But anyway, I do love the old hymns. Christmas, we did. I don't think. Well, I never went to Christmas Eve services. I didn't even know what the Jewish schedule, the holidays were. When I looked on the calendar and said Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, I asked somebody and they said, those are Catholic holidays. What? I mean, I never knew what a Jew was. I mean, and then here comes Freddie Boy. Christmas was a big, my mom has two sisters and there's a ton of family that gathers around, and same with Easter and all that, but nothing formal like Hanukkah candles or anything. We just did the traditional Christmas and holiday stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I actually spent more time in church, Catholic church, than I did in synagogue growing up. I always had Catholic girlfriends. And so I went to several midnight masses and some other things. So I didn't really grow up in the church, but I was exposed. And so God has a huge sense of humor. If you haven't noticed yet, everything I really learned about my faith, just like most other people, some of it was passed down, but a lot of it came from Fiddler on the Roof. So I recommend if you want to know anything about the Jewish traditions and how things work, then you need to go ahead and watch Fiddler on the Roof. It's
okay.
A great movie.
True confession, I had to watch the movie 4 times before I stayed awake.
Yeah, it's very long. It's very long. So anyway, I grew up, both mommy and daddy, grandma and grandpa, from as far back as I remember and as far as I know, were Jewish. And so, little fun story. 2 years ago, Melynda, I think, and the kids did a DNA test. And so I decided, I don't think I really need to do that. So Jordan came back 50% Jew. Go figure. So, 50%. And so, where do you think he got all 50% of that? Because I'm 100% that I remember going back. And it's either, Ashkenazic, Sephardic Jews, depending on, Polish, Russian Jews. That's really where my family kind of came from. We didn't have a synagogue membership. We didn't do any of that, like I said. Kind of grew up in a racist home.
Go back. Can I explain something that I learned about your family years ago?
Sure.
Okay. So Rabinovitz wasn't the name that when his family immigrated over here. It was some name that starts with an M that I cannot pronounce. And so the family legend goes that when his grandparents were immigrating in, they had to their names had to be Americanized. I learned this from my brother-in-law.
They came in through Ellis Island.
Yeah, through Ellis Island, and the immigration person that was giving people's names had a headache that day, so that we're told. And he just said the people in front of him had the name Rabinovitz, and he says, I can't think anymore, or whatever. I'm going to give you the same last name, and that's how they got their last name.
They just typically made names up for people and modified them as they came in through Ellis Island.
Yeah, I mean that's why you have Wits and Vits and and all that,
all of the different variations thereof. So, my brother-in-law did a lot of that research, and so it was pretty cool. But so anyway, go back. We grew up in kind of a racist home. We grew up in the inner city of Boston. Blacks weren't the only target, if you will. Over on this coast, we don't have a lot of Puerto Ricans, but on the East Coast, there's quite a bit. And so Puerto Rican was kind of the, Hispanic variation. And so we had not so nice names for those folks and derogatory terms. And one of the things that you learned if you're on the East Coast was you could tell what somebody's nationality was just based on their last name. So if their last name ended in an I, you just knew, like Lipinski or something, that probably Polish. If it ended in an O, they're probably Italian. I went to school with a guy named Mario Montagano. And so you just knew different people, and then you would treat them based on their ethnicity. And of course, Jews were picked on too. Anti-Semitism was pretty alive and well, and probably still is. So it was just what we did. I think my dad said something to me, or one of my brothers, akin to I don't care who you bring home as long as she's not black. Yeah, I mean, we pretty, and the N word was thrown around without abandon. I mean, so that's how I grew up. Very judgmental, and somewhat racist. One experience that I had that kind of formed me that I wanted to share with you was I was pretty athletic, uh, and very good at what I did. And so I made several select baseball teams and football teams and things like that. Well, the football team that I was on, uh, it was the beginning of the season and it was a jamboree, and we had to get on a bus and go to another field and basically play about a 10-minute quarter, uh, for the different towns all came together, and it just a jamboree just to kick off the season. And one of the things that they had said was you need to bring $5 to get on this bus to go to the jamboree. And I don't remember if I asked or if I didn't ask. I think I asked, but the answer was we don't have $5, or I didn't get $5. And I was 13 years old. I wasn't going to make $5 anywhere. I didn't get an allowance. And I remember going up to the bus, and one of the coaches looked at me and, said, "Where's your $5?" And I just looked at him and I said, I don't have it. And I will never forget the look. I don't know if it was a look of disgust or a look of disdain, or a look of something, but he just looked at me and get on the bus. And I never forgot that. And it kind of made me think that I couldn't trust anybody, and that anything that I was going to have in life, I was going to have to earn. And so I became very self-sufficient, very selfish, and very driven in all of that. And so that plays into quite a bit of my personality and my nature. I have since I'm a recovering selfish person, and and all of that. But it really made me independent. And again, one of those sports teams that I was on, was a baseball team, and I think I've had the jacket here. I actually won my first championship when I was 13 years old, Tri-Town Pony League baseball, and I still have the jacket from 1975. And what we had to do is we had to sell raffle tickets to earn money to buy the jackets, because there was no money in the community fund to do that. And it was the right thing to do, right, to commemorate a championship. Well, I remember in bed I bought, and I don't know where I got the money, but I had bought like 2 or 3 of these raffle tickets, and I really wanted whatever the raffle was, and I don't even remember what it was. And I can remember lying in bed having a conversation with God. It's probably the first time I ever prayed. And I said, "God, if you let me win this raffle," and I promised something like over the moon. Not that I could offer God anything that he could really use at that point, but that was my prayer, was, "God, I really want to win this raffle. And if you exist, it's kind of my fleece out there, then you will, grant me this one wish, if you will, and I will win this raffle, and then I'll know you're God," kind of thing. Well, guess what? I didn't win the raffle. Surprise, surprise. And so what that did was that just cemented even more in me that, yes, he is God and he does exist, but he's way too busy running the universe to be concerned about little old me. Way too busy. So I didn't give up on God. I just gave up on God helping me. And so again, I got more selfish and more self-determined and more self-sufficient. So those were kind of some of the things that I experienced growing up. So did you have any significant things growing up that made you who you were?
Well, I grew up. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Good News Club. It was and it was in the public schools. I don't know where it's at with the COVID, but we would go to someone's home and we'd hear about Jesus, and that's where I got saved, October of 1974. And I remember we would have scripture memorization contests and stuff. And I love a good contest, guys. I mean, chili cook-off, you name it. If I can do it and I know I can do it, I'll do it. And I thrived on memory, verse memorization. Like I said, grew up in the church. I won't say my stepdad wasn't saved, but it was a divided home Christianity wise. And mom went to church with us. But my dad's kids didn't really go to church with us. But so we would go to, like I said, to the Assemblies of God Church. As a matter of fact, Michelle's grandfather was my 5th grade Sunday school teacher, Mr. Fugman. And he was a sweet old man. And that's all I remember is that he was just he always talked about his granddaughter. I won't say what he called you because I remember that, but I was really confused. But he loved you. He really did. I remember that from long ago because I knew I wanted to meet you someday because you were just the apple of his eye. And so I grew up in the church, and I didn't go to children's church because I liked I liked adult worship. I liked all of that. My sister, Allison, went to children's church, and she was a little screamer. I mean, she really was.
Still is.
She's still a little screamer. I mean, I would babysit for the pastors when they had kids as we grew up. Went to youth group. It took me a long time to get to a point of going to youth group, but the church is really where I hung out. I was there on Wednesday nights. We had Sunday night services. I was there. Sometimes I was in the church nursery. But if there was somewhere in the church that needed help, filling a position, I pretty much jumped in. Sunday school, nursery, whatever. It was just where my heart was. Grew up going to youth group, like I said, and I grew up in I think my mom can back me up on this. We had a very black and white family as far as there was the one way of doing it or the wrong way of doing it, the right way or the wrong way, right? If you don't, I can't tell you how many times I heard, and forgive my language, Melynda, if you aren't going to do this the right way, don't do it, or don't do it half-assed. That's what I heard a lot of is, Melynda, don't do things half-assed. And so I took Christianity the same way. I didn't know about grace. We had, one way of doing it. The church I grew up in didn't believe in dancing. So for a while though, even though I liked growing up in the church, Christianity became kind of boring because I saw my friends having fun, but I wasn't having that much fun. But still, God was very real to me. I mean, he walked with me in some really hard areas. But I had to over the time of this man, I had to learn about grace and what grace and gray areas are.
Yeah. So what I had to learn a lot was forgiveness. I shared this. We were with another Bible study on Friday night, and I said, my family didn't know divorce. Jews don't divorce. At least they didn't in my family. They just lived together miserable. That's kind of how it worked. And so when divorce started happening in my generation, my brothers and sisters, and I went through one, it was all new. I did not know how to do it. I had no experience with it. And so forgiveness was kind of a big deal in divorce, right? A lot of divorces don't end well. But one of the reasons why they continue to go poorly is because of a lack of forgiveness between the spouses.
And your Jewish mothers can hold the grudge.
Oh yeah, yeah. My mom didn't want to be on the wrong side of her. Just an example, my brother, one of my older brothers, kind of got on the wrong side of my mom. And so she actually showed up at his wedding wearing black and spoke to no one.
And she was in no pictures.
But so that was one of the ways that my mother was very passive aggressive, very, very loving, great mom. But man, all those things about Jewish moms, they're all true.
I experienced it too with her too.
But I was a good kid growing up. I wasn't a perfect kid growing up. I was a thief. I stole from my employers mostly, but I didn't go out and break into houses and steal things. I was generally a good person, but I was not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. God has always had me. I don't know if you're one of those people that God doesn't give you many choices. And that's kind of how it is in my life. God knows that I don't do well with choices. And so he pretty much only gives me one path. I applied to several different colleges. I got one acceptance letter. I applied after I graduated from college to many different employers. I got one offer. God he kind of directs my path that way because he took me where I needed to be. Because probably left to myself, I would have, not that I could have screwed up God's plan, it just would have taken me longer to get here, because God is sovereign and he does get his way in all of that. So fast forward a bunch of years, graduate from high school, had been engaged to my high school sweetheart on and off through college and for a couple of times, and uh, didn't didn't end up marrying her, but we were engaged several times because you always go back to what you know, don't you? It's so much easier to be with somebody, even if it's not the best situation. It's what you know, and so the dog returning to its vomit is a biblical verse. It's a biblical verse, and unfortunately, it's in there because it's practical, because that's how humans are. We will return unless something different changes our dynamics. And so I didn't understand forgiveness again. And so my first job out of college, I worked for a very small consulting firm, engineering consulting firm. And I kind of messed myself. I came in and I thought, I got an engineering degree. Let's engineer the world. And the guy who signs the checks, whose name was on the door, said, yeah, that's all really good. Here, take the garbage out. And I said, you don't understand. I'm not a sanitation engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. And he said, yeah, take the garbage out. So that didn't make me feel real happy. And I said, well, give me a job to do. Give me an architect and some plans and let me design this building and this HVAC system, and I can do it. And he's like, no, you're not ready. And I'm like, no, I can do it. I got an engineering degree, right? Which taught me nothing about HVAC and nothing about architectural plans. But I knew I could do it. He's like, okay, here, take these drawings and drive them to the architect in Boston. So this was in a suburb. And I'm like, but I'm not a courier engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. And he's like, yeah. Drive these plans to the architect. Last in, you get those jobs, right? And you have to do them to be able to learn the biz and get relationships built. Well, he did give me a job, and I spent the next year working so much overtime I didn't get paid for, trying to unbury myself, and finally got to the end of it and knew that because I wasn't big into forgiveness, I thought I needed a career restart, that my career at this company was over. I was done, that I had really messed myself and that my reputation was not salvageable. So I went and saw a headhunter, just somebody I found out of the phone book. Within 3 weeks, he found me got me an interview, and I got an interview and I got an offer. Again, God knows what he's doing, right? To go to work for Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut. So I moved to Connecticut. And so a couple of years into that, I switched jobs, and one of the enticements to taking this new job at Electric Boat was to come to Bangor and to do some ship checks on some of the Ohio class submarines. And I thought the farthest I had actually been was Milwaukee. I had gone on a business trip to Milwaukee, and it was in the summer, so it was really nice. I liked was it Lake Erie, or one of those Great Lakes, and it was really nice, and I really liked it. I decided I like flying, I like traveling, and so yeah, I'll fly cross country, and so I did. And ultimately, I fell in lust with the hotel receptionist.
That's not me.
Was not her. And did some things that were incredibly out of character. Called my boss back on the East Coast and said, I'm not coming home for a while. I'm going to take some vacation time. Checked out of the hotel, checked into her trailer, and we spent like a week together. We went down to Ocean Shores and did everything that you can imagine we probably shouldn't have done, but we did it anyway. And I came back to the East Coast and decided that I was going to send her a one-way ticket to Connecticut if she would take advantage of that. Why would she do that, right? We'd spent a week together. She really didn't know me. I really didn't know her, but this was what I did. Uh, well, she accepted. She took the plane ticket, and I think she was really running more from something than running to me. And which is why kind of the marriage lasted 5 years after the dust had settled in her life, and she decided to. It was safe now to go out on her own again. She did, but God used her in my life because she went to work at a jewelry store in New London, Connecticut, at the Crystal Mall, and there was a Jewish gal working behind the counter. Go figure, right? And so growing up, people asked me if my father was a doctor or was a jeweler or was in the garment industry, because those are the stereotypes, and none of them. No, my parents were none of those, and we didn't have money. So this Jewish gal behind the counter tells my wife, or going to be soon my wife, because I proposed to her, she accepted, and then came up pregnant like 2 months later. So all of this is happening, and we're going to move from the East Coast back here because she hates the summers and hates the winters. They're just brutally hot and muggy and sticky and cold and windy and nasty and snowy. So she got 1 year and she was done. But in that 1 year, so this Jewish gal behind the counter, coworker, said, "He's Jewish, you're Christian," because she was professing Christianity. "You need to do something about this." Well, I had grown up with Catholic girlfriends. Religion was not a big deal to me. I was 25 years old and I was really ignorant of my own faith and every other faith out there. I thought there were Jews, Catholics, and Baptists. That was it. That was the extent of the spiritual world for me. I did not know that all of the different denominations and everything were out there.
And you didn't pick anything up for being the Roman soldier.
Oh, yeah. So God has a huge sense of humor. So I have a picture. I think I've shown you the picture. When I was 13 years old, me and my two brothers played Roman soldiers in a Baptist church Easter program. And it all went right over my head. And nobody tried to witness to me or anything. So God protected me.
And he was in it for the girl.
I was, no, I don't know that there was a girl involved, but maybe. There's always a girl involved, right? So what they got, let's get the Jewish boys to crucify Jesus. I think that was probably their thinking. So me and my two brothers played Roman soldiers in this Easter play at the Baptist church. It was pretty funny. But I was pretty ignorant. I was 25 and I did not know. So I knew Jesus was Jewish, but we didn't talk about him. But nobody, and I didn't know why. Nobody would tell me. And so when this gal said, "He's Jewish and you're Christian and you got to get this thing figured out," I'm like, what's the big deal? Religion was not going to be an issue. I was self-sufficient. I didn't need God. I didn't need religion. I had gotten everything that I had in life, I had earned. I put myself through college. I bought my own car. I paid rent to my parents while I was in high school working. Okay. I literally feel like I owed nobody anything. I had everything I had earned because I was smart and I was energetic and I was that good at everything I did. And all you had to do was ask me and I'll tell you how good I was. So I asked a coworker at Electric Boat, I said, "Would your pastor meet with me? Because I don't have any idea why this is such a big deal." And so he said yes. So I went and talked to this pastor and he kind of boiled it down for me. And he said, basically, Jews are still waiting for their Messiah and Christians believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that he claimed to be God. And I said, "That's it?" Really, that was my response. That's it? People have been killing each other for thousands of years because he claims to be God and they said, "No, you're not." That seems kind of petty to me. But I was like, if he wants to be God, he can be God. I wasn't there. I don't know. I started to read the Bible because I wanted to know. And I got through this first 6 chapters and got bored. I hated reading. Actually, I got through college and high school on Cliff Notes. Hate reading. Was not a reader. That'll come into play in a little bit. So I said, well, if that's it, if that's all there is, then I can be a Christian. He can be, if Jesus wants to be God, fine. So I told my parents that I would raise the kids in a Christian home or raise them in church or something. That didn't go over real big with my parents. But they didn't disown me. See, my family was still actually kind of ignorant of their own faith, because once I had said that, I should have been dead to them, right? But I wasn't. So anyway, I started calling myself a Christian, but I didn't make any commitments. I didn't make any prayers. Nothing changed. We moved here to Washington. And again, sovereignly, I got offered one job from the shipyard, 2340 test engineer, and lived in Bremerton for like 2 years before we built the house that I have in Port Orchard. And it just so happens I built it a quarter of a mile from an evangelical free church, which is right up on the corner. God knows what he's doing. We bought that land, I think, from my ex-wife's grandfather. So I'm into this whole grandfather buying, selling land thing. About 6 months into living in the new house, God, I'm going to give him credit for this, although again, never audibly spoken to me. We said, you know what? We've got 2 kids now. I had Rose and Mary, and we need to start giving these kids an education, in a spiritual education. We need to do more than I got. And so let's take them to church. Let's start taking them to church. And so she was a Christian, apparently had gone to church more than I had, in that I had only gone to Catholic church and only midnight masses for Christmas services. So she went and checked it out and came home and said, yeah, we can go there. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I swear the first week I walked in, I felt the color of blue of these chairs. I mean, that's what I felt. It wasn't conviction, but it was just, these people had something I didn't have. And I like the first time I ever really had that sense that, you know, there's something going on here that I can't explain and I can't control. Made me really uncomfortable. A couple of weeks go by, and I continue to go back, and I'm working through, I don't know what's going on here. Every time I walk in here, there's something going on, but I don't know what it is. Until the pastor has this altar call, or it wasn't quite an altar call, but it was sitting in your seats. And when the pastor says eyes closed and heads bowed, I thought that was like everybody. I know better now. It is not. And so with eyes closed and heads bowed, he's like, it wasn't a who wants to receive Jesus, it's who has a hard spot, who's struggling to make this decision. And I had been in service enough now that I knew what I didn't know. And that the thing that these people had that I didn't have was this Jesus guy. And so, of course, now I'm thinking I'm in church and I shouldn't lie, right? I should be honest. If somebody asks you something and you're in church, you should, because I was generally a moral person, right? And you need to, be honest. So, hey, and everybody's eyes are closed and everybody's heads bowed anyway. Who's going to see it? This is just between me and God, right? Yeah. So I slip my hand up, bring it right back down, and wait for service to end. Got out of the building with nobody talking to me, and I thought, whew, made it. Cool. And I thought life was just going to keep going. Well, turns out the pastor saw my hand because he was cheating, because that's what we do. And he calls and he goes, can I come over? I'm like, honey, pastor wants to come over. What are you thinking? I mean, the house is clean. I mean, it's brand new. And so it wasn't that kind of an issue of let's like do this rampant cleaning thing and make it presentable. It was a presentable house. And so he came over and he went through the 4 spiritual laws with me. Anybody know the book, The 4 Spiritual Laws? It was a witnessing tool way back when. Basically, who's on the throne kind of thing. And so he does his whole spiel, and he's really good at what he does. And then he gets to the end, and he goes, so what do you say? You want to accept Jesus? You want to pray the prayer? And I did the only thing that I knew to do. I said, I'm Jewish. We don't do that. That was pretty much his response. And he didn't buy it. And he kept pushing, and because here I am, right? At this point, I am the envy of everybody at the office. I think I'm 28 years old now at this point. I have a brand new house. It's going to be paid for pretty soon. I have 2 healthy, beautiful daughters. I have a beautiful wife. I mean, I, I've got success as the world would define success. And it's everything that I had earned. I had worked for this and I deserved it. I deserved it all. And I was the cat's meow. And I thought to myself, why do I need this Jesus guy? I've done pretty good on my own, right? He hasn't helped me yet. What could he do for me? Because everything I had, remember, I had earned because I was that good. But little did I know that God was in every decision to get me to that point. And because I was pretty easily swayed and had some fear of authority as a last born. I think that was still one of the things that was respect for elders and authority figures. I said, sure, okay, I'll do it. And so I did. So I prayed the prayer, closed my eyes, prayed the prayer, opened my eyes. Nothing was different. It was an exercise and an exercise. Well, he put a notch in his Bible, and then and left. He did his job, and he did it really well. I went to bed that night. My wife at the time said she was proud of me, and I don't know why, but she said she was. I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and everything was different. Like I can't explain it, but everything was different. It's not like I was a bad person and had to change all of my moral, nature. But I would now read the Bible and I would like, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that makes sense. And when I started reading the Bible, I couldn't put it down. This is a guy who hates reading. Hates reading. I mean, it took me like almost a year to get through Hunt for Red October, and I wanted to read it. And it still took me a year to get through it. I just don't like reading. I could not put the Bible down. I had then of talking to my wife at the time saying, we need to go back to church. We need to, and even though free was in its name, Harper Evangelical Free Church, I decided that maybe we should give more than $5 a week. I'm starting to feel the conviction of God but everything was different. I even had people at work look at me and say, after the fact, Denny O'Neill, a friend of mine who I did a Bible study with for a lot of years afterwards, he said, yeah, I knew you before. And he said, your whole countenance changed. Everything about you changed. Your face, your countenance, your demeanor, everything changed. And so it wasn't just me deciding to be spiritual or religious. It was like God really did an amazing work. And it was pretty cool. I didn't really know what was going on. Again, no coincidences, and God is very faithful. He immediately moved me at the shipyard, and we used to work in cubicles, so there was two people, and basically you would be your backup for the person who sat behind you. Similar jobs. The guy was a navigator. In other words, it's a ministry that works with military organizations, whether it's the Air Force or the Navy. Any of you know the navigators. And it was scripture memorization. So he's like, let's start memorizing scripture. And I'm like, okay. So I started memorizing scripture, and I think I got like up to 120, and then something happened. I stopped memorizing scripture, but that's a lot of scripture. And about 5 months after that, my wife decided that I wasn't the guy she wanted to be with anymore. Not that I did, drink, smoke, and act ugly. It was just I wasn't the guy she wanted to be with. Her life had settled down. Apparently, the things that she was running from had gone away, and I was no longer necessary. And God was so very gracious to me during all of that time. I was not angry at her. I was not mad at her. I don't hate her. I didn't hate her then, and I don't hate her now. I was very sad, and it was very emotional, but it wasn't devastating because I knew God had a plan. Because she stopped going to church because she actually confessed unfaithfulness, was acting like an unbeliever, and wanted to leave. So I'm like, well, it's kind of the trifecta of letting her go. And as I'm sitting in church, God gave me this incredible peace, and he said, I've built you and I've designed you and I'm creating you to be a husband and a father, and let her go. And I will bring you somebody who will go with you where I'm taking you. When you're a new believer, you say yes to a whole bunch of things. It's like a blank check, right? So I wrote the blank check to God saying, anything you want, Lord. So the fact that we're sitting here today having this conversation, I blame her. So tell them why I blame you.
Okay. When I was at the end of my 8th grade year, I was getting ready to go to church on Wednesday night. And my dad came home from work, sat down on the living room couch and said, Jan, call the doctor. I don't feel good. 2 minutes later, he says, never mind, call an ambulance. I'm having a heart attack. And those were his exact words. I gathered Allison up and we went down to the main road of the front of the house and we waited for an ambulance and we watched my dad get taken away. That night, he flatlined 3 times. In that time period, while they were doing that, I took care of Allison, called the pastor, found a place to stay for the night. And again, the church became my refuge. I went to church. People didn't believe what had happened. They were looking for my mom. I said, no, she's on her way. And that's how I lived my teenage years. I can't relate to a lot of what teenagers go through because I was helped. I became, sorry to say this, I became Allison's second mom, essentially. When mom was at the hospital, I was the one who had to call my brothers and sisters at college, and they were taking finals and say, guess what? Dad's at the hospital. In high school, junior high, it was real common. My dad just had a series of heart issues. I would get called out of class a lot to be told dad had a heart attack or they had to take him. One time, mom got locked out of the house when they were waiting for the ambulance, and I came home to a broken window and I had no clue what had happened. And the paramedics had to break open the window with an oxygen tank because dad was getting ready to flatline. And so that's how I grew up. And my dad had rules for his kids and he had rules for me. And mine were very different. And so they were very strict. And my dad was a good man, but in today's society, my dad would have been considered verbally abusive. And I've forgiven all that. But when I graduated from high school, I wasn't going to go to college, but I ended up going to Central Washington one year out in Ellensburg. And I only went 1 year because I failed a class and I got on academic suspension. I failed logic. It didn't make any sense to me. I know, right? And so I came home, went to work and
saying nothing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it just didn't make sense. And I like to socialize. Started working, moved out of my parents' house right before my 21st birthday and with 2 dear friends of mine. And we just decided to do everything our parents told us not to do. I mean, because I helped raise Allison. It was just a very different lifestyle. And so we went out and we partied. We went to Denny's at 2:00 in the morning for pie. I worked 60 hours a week. We just did it all. And then God got my attention. I met a girl when I was working, because I was working 2 jobs. I met a girl at Kmart, because that was where I was working 40 hours. And I felt kind of sorry for her. And she was being raised by her grandparents. And she found out she was pregnant. And she didn't have anybody. The father of her child was nowhere in the picture. And I said, here, let me be your friend. Let me bring you back to Jesus. And I started walking that road with her. And I said, let me just go into the delivery room with you and I'll just be your support person. 3 weeks into her childbirth classes, I found out I was pregnant. That's how much I was going against the flow of things. And so we decided to walk this journey together. And when that little girl was born, I was actually the day that when my friend went to the hospital to have her, I was being told that my child they thought was twins. I had an emergency ultrasound because I had just gotten so big so fast. And so I missed the birth of that child. Well, that was God's hand on me. I'm going to go back a few months. When I first found out I was pregnant, I went back to the church and I got my heart right with the Lord. And I went forward for an altar call. And my friend Carly went forward with me. And I said, because like I said, I was raised in the church. I loved the church, and going to church as a single pregnant unwed mother was kind of a shame thing back then. You didn't see many of them. And those people just kind of disappeared. And my friend Carly said, Melynda, there's nothing you can't do that I won't love you for, and neither will God. And those were the words that stuck with me. So I was able to share that love as I went through with this other friend and just love on this child. Well, like I said, I missed the delivery of that child, and lo and behold, and at the time I didn't realize it, but the child that I was getting ready to have was going to be that child's half sister. When I had Emily, I had toxemia. I had moved in with my grandparents because I was getting sick with blood pressure issues and I needed to go on bed rest. I went from preeclampsia to toxemia, and I had to be induced with Emily for 2 days. I was literally almost dying on the delivery table, and I did not know it. And when we got through all that, and out came this 8-pound, 13-ounce girl, she was the apple of my eye. My mom was there with us, and she was beautiful. And I went on maternity leave, and I took Emily to church, and we did all these things. When I went very first week, I went back to work at Kmart. The personnel manager came up to me and she says, "How's child support going?" I said, "What do you mean? I haven't even started any of that because I'm a single parent." And she says, "I know, but there's a child that comes into the store an awful lot, and she looks an awful lot like your daughter." So I called that girl's mom, and she said, "Yes, our daughters had the same father." And I was still with Emily's birth father at the time. Not for much longer after that, because I wanted to make sure I could get his name on the birth certificate. And I just decided I was going to love this child, and that Emily and her half sister were going to at least know of each other. And a weird fact, the girls have the same middle name. So kind of weird, huh? So we proceeded down that journey together. Not close friends, but enough that we could see that I wanted Emily to know that she had a half sister.
Turns out she's got many half siblings.
I'm getting there. And so I left. Emily's birth father eventually left the picture, and I still continued to live with my grandparents. And I was denied public assistance because I made $200 over the monthly gross limit. And I didn't qualify for child care benefits. I didn't qualify for anything. So I really had to work hard. And I had to trust my Emily with my mom, babysitters, anybody who could watch them. And I just, because of the male influences that I'd had in my life, and as far as men in my employment and in my daughter's birth father and all this, I was getting to a point where I resented men. I hated men because I thought of them as hotheads, and I didn't want anything to do with them. And that's when God really started to change in my heart. I just said, "There's just no way I will raise this child by myself. I don't want to have a partner in life. If this is how life is going to be, me and God will raise her." And I had a friend when I was working at Kmart who watched Emily, and she taught me the I Love Jesus game, because I got to a point where I was really down and depressed. And she said, "Do you love Jesus more than Emily?" "Yes." "Do you love Jesus more than this?" She says, "Count your blessing. I love Jesus more than." And that's what took me out of those areas. And I had to put, when I could confess that I love Jesus more than all these other things, this peace came upon me, and I was able to say, "We'll be okay." I'd put my name on the housing authority list, and my name did come up right about Emily was getting ready to turn 2, and I wasn't getting child support because I wasn't on welfare, so they weren't pursuing it. I was granted $25 a month, and that took me 3 hours in mediation to even get that in writing, because Emily's birth father was just the way he was. But this other child who was being raised on the welfare system was getting a lot, and so again, I had to learn forgiveness and grace and trust in the Lord. I put my name on the Bremerton Housing Authority list, and lo and behold, one day in April, I just had a few days off from working at Kmart, and they called me and said, "Can you move into West Park Housing?" That was the last place I wanted to move, because it wasn't safe. I'd heard too many stories. I said, "No, we have to take my name off the list. God's got something better." The very next week, I met Fred.
She was the granddaughter of my neighbor's friends, and so
my grandparents went camping with his neighbors.
My neighbors basically were setting me up with all of their friends' daughters and granddaughters. And as a matter of fact, our first date that we had, I got a call from a gal that I had previously dated, but she didn't want to date me again. She wanted me to date her cousin. I got that call while Melynda and I were having dinner together, our first dinner. Yeah. So, but one of the times that Melynda, I got saved at Harper. She was going to Assemblies of God Church. And so when we got together, we decided, well, we should probably go to the same church. And it was a pretty whirlwind courtship. It wasn't even a year.
We
Right.
met in April. We were engaged in June and married the following February.
Yeah. So it was pretty. People had bets on us of how long it would last.
And when our first date, I wasn't sure I even liked him.
She didn't like me, and I was all that and a bag of chips, and I'm like, what? Come on, really?
He called me on the phone and he says, yes, I'm height and weight proportionate. I have root beer brown eyes and I can bench press, what was it, 150 pounds?
Oh no, it was well over 200.
Well over, and I just thought, oh wait. And then he said the thing that was the clincher for me. I'm a nuclear engineer. And all I could think of was, and I just got contacts. So all I could think about was this guy with a pocket protector here with all these pens, with these buff muscles, with these nerdy glasses.
I was hot. But anyway, so we got married, and then I heard about this church in Federal Way, this Messianic church called Congregation Beth Simcha, and so Jewish roots of the Christian faith. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm Jewish. Let's go check that out. They met on a Saturday, so we went. We liked it. I mean, all of the stuff that she was told growing up, no dancing, and they're up there dancing right in the front.
Yeah, I got in the church. I said, Lord, if this is of you, you make it very clear right now, or I'm out that door.
Yeah. So we started to go to both churches. We decided that we were going to go full time to the Messianic Church, which did not make the Assemblies of God Church very happy, and they accused us of losing our salvation.
I was on the prayer team, and I was just finishing up, and we'd already sent the letter in, but I was still on a rotation on the prayer team. The lady who called me to pray decided to add her little 2 cents and decided that at the end of that prayer, and she prayed for my salvation. And I said, wait a minute. I said, I'm not losing my salvation. Well, Jews just don't get saved. You just don't know what you're talking about. I said, Jews do get saved. You don't know what you're talking about. And we left it at that.
So we went to this, and we were there for 3.5 years. And I got involved in men's ministries and elders and council and all of that. And I felt a call to pastoral ministry. And so right around the time that I had started the conversation with the pastor, and we were good friends, as well as I was on his board and doing a lot of ministry, a church opened up in Olympia, congregation.
On Friday nights.
They met on Friday nights. Lion of Judah, Kiryat Yehuda. And they were just looking for somebody Jewish to lead them. That's really all. And it was just, they put out a global letter saying, hey, we're looking for a Jewish guy to lead us, because apparently their pastor, who wasn't Jewish, ran off with the secretary. And yeah, so that's what I was walking into. So I went down and I did an interview with Church of Living Water, who is the district church. And I said, I don't know anything and I don't have any credentials. Shouldn't I like get a license or something? And they're like, yeah, we'll get that for you. That'll be fine. Don't worry about that. And I'm thinking, don't worry about that. That's kind of a big deal. I haven't been to Bible school. I've been mentored and discipled and all this, but they're like, yeah. And I said, I don't know how to pastor people, but I know how to love people. And he's like, then you're the guy. And they gave me the church. Foursquare took a chance on me. Big one. Gave me a church. And it were like 12 people, 15 people, maybe with babies. It wasn't a big church, and broken. And, but I just knew what I didn't know, and I got mentored some more, and I just learned how to love people. And it was fun. And we did that I think this is about the time Melynda shared with me that, her prayer as a little kid growing up was to be a pastor's wife. She didn't tell me that before.
Well, and being raised after I became a unwed single mother, I thought, there goes those chances. I mean, nobody's going to take me in as a pastor's wife and all that. No way.
Yeah. So she shares that with me, and so I blame her for all of this, because it was not my prayer as a Jewish boy growing up. This is not how I saw my life ending. But anyway, so a lot of things happened, and so here we are. We grew that church in Olympia. So long story, really short. We grew that church in Olympia. We got noticed by a local pastor in Kitsap, and got invited to go on staff. And so I decided it was the Lord's will, that we had prayed about it and it all seemed right. So I don't have to be in charge, but I have to, I just want to be where the Lord wants me to be. So I gave up my senior pastor to become an associate at another church because, again, I was just wanted to humble myself and be where the Lord wanted me to be. And it seemed like the right thing to do. It turned out it was not a match.
I won't say it was it was still the right thing for us to do because we had to learn through this.
God,
we had to grow through
again,
this.
God is orchestrating each one of these moves. Yes, but again, it's just what I want you to hear is God is at work in your life, and He will give you lots of choices, or He will give you no choices, but He is at work for His goodwill and pleasure, and for your uh, promotion and to get you where you need to be. Right? We talked about it in Sunday school. What is the Lord's will? What is your calling? Well, to be where you're supposed to be and doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's when there's great peace. So from there, we planted this church 19 years ago, and some of you have been here since day one. Some of you have been here shortly thereafter. Some of you have been pretty new, but so that's pretty much our story. And you've heard me say over and over again. And we struggled. The first 5 years of our marriage was no picnic.
It was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. I was not a nice guy. I there was a lot of things God needed to do in me.
We didn't blend families very well. We should have done things a little bit differently.
Yeah, but she was committed to me, and I was committed to her, and we knew that God had brought us together for a purpose, and that and the reason and that we stayed together was because of all of the people that we had witnessed to and done ministry with, and I refused. I just made a decision. I refused to give Jesus a black eye. There's enough people leaving the church because of other human beings. I was not going to be one of those people that had to stand before God and have to give an account for why people left the church because of my testimony or my witness or my leadership of them. That's why I lead, is I want to be able to stand before the Lord and say, I did the best I could with what I had and who you gave me. And I was as gracious to them and as humble to them and had their best interest in heart, never intending to have a big church and make a lot of money. Those were never important. It was always, giving Jesus a great reputation and modeling him so others could have what we have. And so when we decided the Bible's true and that God's ways are higher than our ways, and that we're going to default to his principles in our decision making, then God just continues to take care of us. Just continues to take care of us. And then God gave us Jordan. And yes, it took me an hour to get there. But yeah, but Jordan is really he's a treasure. Emily's a treasure. They're in different earthen vessels, but we love our life. We love you. We love pastoring. We love God, and everything that we've been through, everything I've been through, and she's been through, have equipped us to really just love you and to help you become who you're supposed to be in the Lord. That's hopefully your testimony of your relationship with us. And again, if we're not better for knowing you and you're not better for knowing us, we probably shouldn't be spending a lot of time together. And so you have all enriched our lives. But so that's kind of our history and how God can take a stiff-necked, arrogant, selfish, obnoxious Jew from Boston and turn him into what I hope is someone that you want to be around, is again nothing short of a miracle. And so he can use you too. And so that's kind of our story. And so many of you knew parts of it, but that's kind of the whole story. So kind of know where we came from and why we do what we do. It's because of God's grace on us and his grace. And we've learned forgiveness toward each other, which allows us to be very forgiving to other people. And again, no right, wrong, good, bad, fair, unfair. We try to get rid of the judgments and just treat people based on how they've treated us and treat people how God wants them treated and to afford them the grace and the forgiveness that is available And who are we to withhold that, right? And so that's what we want you to know through our stories this morning is God is really good, and if you let Him, uh, He will turn everything to um, this savory uh, uh, experience that you couldn't create on your own, even if you tried. Even if you could control everything, you wouldn't want to. Like right now, I could control a lot more things than I do. I choose not to. I choose to give control to God, and that's what makes uh, doing things as much fun as they are. And so that took probably around an hour, but there are two testimonies. So, but we appreciate you guys a lot. I guess, are there any questions? Let's just give you opportunities to ask a question or two if there are. You want to know something about us, or maybe see us afterwards. If you don't know that if it's not a public question and you want to ask a private question, that's fine too. Uh, I've said more than my share of stupid things in our marriage. One of the things that we've had to learn is God gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want. I think the first time I said that, it was not in a great context when I mentioned that to Melynda. But now she's turned that around and she says that quite a bit to me. God gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want.
Well, and when he meets our need, it far exceeds what we thought we wanted.
It really does. And so those are the truths we want you to walk away with this morning. Not just hearing our story, but being encouraged that your story is still being written also. And you still have lots of influence. And so take that and do something with it. Do something really cool with it. And do something cool with it in your own family, and do something cool with it in whatever other relationships you choose to have as you walk through life.
When I first met Fred, my mom said, "Stay away."
Yeah, divorced guy with 2 kids, run. That was the advice she got. Yeah, so aren't you glad you didn't listen?
I don't listen to many people.
Yeah, there you go.